What is the absolute latest you could put grass seed down and still have a nice lawn? What is the first day you could put it down and not have it burn out? When should you mow? When's the first time you should fertilize? I'm going to answer all those questions and more in this episode of the Lawn Lab. My name is JJ Tipton, and I'm a Maryland State Certified Fertilizer Applicator and Pesticide Applicator. On screen here are all the major milestones of a seeding project, whether that be overseeding or doing a complete lawn renovation. Today, I'm going to go through each of these milestones and show you how I arrived at the target dates for each of them. If you're looking to renovate a cool season lawn this fall, then I recommend a budget 45 days between your first frost date and when you put the seed down. What that means is you should find your area's first frost date and then back up 45 days. As long as you put your seed down before that date, I can confidently say that you're going to have a successful seeding project. Why the first frost? Well, new seedlings can be very delicate, and if they don't have enough time to grow and mature, then a frost can damage them, and it might be too late in the season for those seedlings to recover before more consistent cold weather sets in. So how do we calculate our first frost date? We're going to use historical weather data. On the screen below, as well as linked below, is the website link to the National Gardening Association's frost calculator. Go to that website and type your zip code in, and a chart like this is going to appear with a bunch of dates and percentages. Let's move down to 32 degrees, which is going to be our frost event. And as we move to the right, the percentages of that frost event go up as we get later and later in the year. I recommend using the 30% date, and for me, that's October 27th. This gives us enough time before it gets cold, but also doesn't stress us out like we need to be planning for this in the summer. Let's fill October 27th in on our timeline. Now that we have our first frost date, let's back up 45 days. That gets us to September 13th. That is the date at which I recommend somebody living in my area get their seed down by. Let's throw September 13th on our timeline. A little insider info here, I renovated this yard last year and I didn't get that seed down until October 26th. Yes, one day before our 30% chance of having our first frost. And this is what it looked like on November 16th. So don't worry if you feel like you're getting at this a little too late or you don't have enough time to completely renovate a lawn. Trust me, you're gonna be fine. Now, can you start sooner than that? Absolutely. But I would highly suggest that you make sure that before you put seed down that the truly hot weather is behind you. And what I mean by that is I really don't want to see any days higher than like 85 as the high max for the rest of the season, because 1 or 2 days in the 90s when you have very small seedlings, they could completely fry them, and then that's all of that time, money, and energy wasted. Remember, the soil only needs to be at 55 degrees for germination, so you're going to have plenty of time on the back end to make sure you get this right. Now let's go back to our timeline. I separate the end of prep day and our seed day as 2 different days. Why do I do this? Because renovating lawn is a lot of work, and it's always more work than you budget for. At minimum, at bare minimum, before you put your seed down, I recommend you scalp your lawn, which means cut it down to 1 to 2 inches. If you're already doing that, then we need to have a conversation. And I also recommend a thorough raking to make sure you get any stuff out of the lawn that might interfere with the seed, making good seed to soil contact. You might also be looking to aerate or dethatch your lawn. You might be ordering your seed online. You need to set up sprinklers. So there's a lot of things that might go in to the logistics of setting this project up. So let's put our end of prep stage down at September 12th. Once your seed's on the ground and you're watering, try to limit foot traffic, but having to move sprinklers around or hoses isn't going to be a problem. How much should you be watering your new grass seed? Every lawn is going to be different, but here are my guidelines. When you walk on the ground, you should get your shoes wet, but there should never be standing water, there should never be mud, and you shouldn't be making footprints. The grass seed does not need much water to germinate. It just needs to be consistently wet. Moisture needs to be present. Never water at night, and your last watering should be between 4 and 5 p.m. As temperatures drop, your soil is going to stay wetter for longer. Okay, your prep work is done, you seeded at the recommended rate, and now you're watering and you're sitting and waiting. This stage is like watching paint dry. How long is it going to take to see germination? Well, every single seed is different. Literally, every seed is different. However, we have some guidelines. For perennial ryegrass, I recommend you budget between 5 to 7 days. For turf type tall fescue, I recommend 10 to 14 days. And Kentucky bluegrass is roughly 21 days. or about 3 weeks. Now, with newer cultivars of Kentucky bluegrass, I've seen germination in as little as a week, but for the other two grass types, I consistently see 5 to 7 perennial rye and at least 10 days for church type tall fescue. Be on the lookout for that first germination. When you see any germination at all, let's count that as day 0. So when should you fertilize? The next milestone is going to be fertilization. So from day 0, that very first peak at germination, I do not recommend fertilizing until day 14. Why do I recommend this? One, because the majority of my projects are overseeding projects, which means that there already is a lawn in some capacity on the ground. I don't want to feed that lawn. I want to feed my new seedlings. Fertilizing into an existing lawn that we've overseed is going to make that grass grow very fast. In addition, all of the watering that we're going to be doing, all of those nutrients are going to get washed into the soil before our seed can germinate and take those in. 14 days after germination, not seed down, but 14 days after germination, the majority of the grass that you have seeded will have germinated by then, except for maybe Kentucky bluegrass. I would give that 3 or 4 weeks, and then that will be an accurate assessment of how much is germinated. At this point, you might be noticing some thin spots. You might be noticing that your spreader isn't as great as you thought it was. And if you did a complete renovation, then you might be really concerned that this grass is not going to fill in as much as you want to. Trust me, you're going to be fine. One seed does not equal one grass blade. A mature fescue plant, for example, will get to be about as big as a human hand, or like a small size plate. Perennial ryegrass and fescues are bunching type grasses, and if you seed a Kentucky bluegrass at maturity, it will not only bunch up and grow out and tiller out, but it will also spread through rhizomes as well. 14 days after germination, at this point, we can back off the frequency of our watering, but we can increase the duration. What that means is if you are watering 3 times a day, now we can shift to 2 times a day, but we can extend those waterings. What I recommend for homeowners is you should always be watering first thing in the morning, and then you should be getting a watering in around noon or 1 p.m. Remember, no standing water, no mud, no footprints. Your first mow. Wait till your new seedlings are around 3 inches tall, and then I recommend cutting them back to about 2 inches. You don't have to wait until they're 4 inches tall or matted over. The more consistent you can mow, the more the grass is going to fill in. Before you mow, make sure you don't water for 24 hours. This is especially important for those with ride-on lawnmowers. Let the soil dry out a bit, and this will give you less of a chance of causing any damage by being on the lawn. Mow with a sharp mower blade and bag your clippings. If you overseed into an existing lawn, it might be well over 4 inches by now. That's totally fine. Let it grow out, cut everything back to 3 inches, and keep watering. Once you start mowing, you should really only be watering once a day, only in the mornings. After your first mow, you're off to the races. Keep watering, but you can begin to cut back to every other day, and then 2 times a week, and then finally back to your normal watering schedule if you had one, or you can rely on just Mother Nature. Remember, the cooler temperatures are going to hold on to that water even longer now, so you really need to make sure you're not overwatering at this point. No puddles, no footprints. Try to mow at least once a week. I recommend mowing twice a week. Make sure you're mowing dry ground, but this means that your grass is going to learn the height that you're cutting at it, and rather than growing up to get that sunlight, it's then going to learn to spread outward. It's going to begin to tiller, and those bunch type grasses are going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. So right here, let's take a look at our final complete timeline for my area, and then I'll give you some extra tips. Number 1, if you have a heavily weed infested yard, I recommend killing those weeds before seeding into them. It is very difficult to seed into mature weeds and think that you're going to get some type of magical transformation. Crabgrass is a summer weed, for example, but it's not going to just evaporate come September and October. It will be there well into the winter. That plant material isn't going to break down overnight. If you're going to kill your weeds, make sure that you use a product that is not going to have a long residual. For example, some weed killers recommend that you don't seed for 3 to 4 weeks after applying it. 2 that I recommend for a quick turnaround are Speed Zone and Quinclorac. Both of them say that you can seed 7 days after applying. After you kill your weeds, that plant matter will still probably be there. So I recommend when you scalp your lawn down or cut it lower than normal, then you take a rake and rake out the heavier areas of weeds to make sure that you get good seed to soil contact. You've seen me do this in other videos, but I don't really recommend killing your whole yard off to do a renovation. When I renovated this yard last year, I aerated, I dethatched, I did a ton of stuff, scalped it down, but I left the grass that's here. If you have turf grass, decent turf grass that has survived to this point, maybe this is your first year renovating, maybe this is a house that you just moved into, I would do everything I could to keep that turf grass. It's going to anchor the seed that you're putting down, and also it has done what it needs to do physiologically and biologically to survive in that atmosphere. That's the grass that you want to keep in your yard. Those are the franchise players. That's what your team needs. Once you add new seed and you begin to take care of your lawn, not only is your new grass going to grow in, but that existing grass is going to thrive. Plus, if you do have an issue, if you live in a hurricane-prone region, if you get a heavy rain, if you screw something up somehow, then that grass is still going to be there rather than having an absolute dirt patch if your seeding project ends in disaster. Soil prep is your number one most important step. You don't have to aerate, you don't have to dethatch, but at a minimum, I recommend mowing as low as you possibly can and then getting a steel tine rake and going through it. Not something heavy duty, just a normal leaf rake to make sure you get all of the debris out of your lawn. Plus, after you seed, I would take the reverse of the rake, so the tines pointing up, and then I would go over the lawn, and that will make sure that the seed gets under that very top layer of soil. And that again is going to ensure really good seed to soil contact. Finally, you should take pictures. It is such a boost seeing things 1 week later, 1 month later, 1 year later. Plus, it's going to give you a good indication of how long this takes if you want to do other parts of your yard as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. My name is JJ, this is Marty, and this has been the Lawn Lab.